Hi everyone, welcome to Punkapad UK with Andrew Scheps.
Hello.
It is his Punkapad, and today we're going to talk about mixing in headphones. I have a question for you, Andrew. Do you mix in headphones?
I do.
Oh,
All right, thanks for coming.
I read everywhere that you just can't mix on headphones. I have it on high authority that no.
It turns out if you don't read that, then you don't know that, and you can just do it.
Ah, that's what it is.
Yeah.
All right, so
If it's on the internet, it's true. But if you don't
Yes.
see it, it's not on the internet.
So do explain. Why would you mix on headphones?
Well, why would you not mix on headphones? I started mixing on headphones when I started mixing stuff in the box and I was traveling, which were two things that happened because of each other. I'd be in a hotel room. I do not have a pair of speakers with me. I work on very large, non-powered speakers. Carry those around with a power amp would be ridiculous. So all I have with me is headphones. I started working on things because I could, always thinking when I get back to the studio, I will listen on speakers. That's when I will sort out the low end, get whatever needs to be fixed, because obviously you can't mix on headphones, but at least I can get some work done. Pretty quickly, I realized that I was listening on speakers to these mixes I'd done on headphones. The only stuff that there was to change would be the exact same stuff you would notice with any sort of perspective on the mix. It wasn't, oh, now I have to sort out the low end. Now I have to do the vocal level. For whatever reason, I was able to mix on these headphones. I use Sony MDR 7506s. They're cheap. They sell them on Amazon. They last, with heavy use, a couple of years before they start to get a little bit tired. Get a new pair. They sound exactly the same. I've been buying them now for over 20 years. I've never noticed them sounding different. I am just really used to them. They're a bit the same as my speakers. The speakers are actually incredibly flat, but that makes them sound very bright because there's no mid-range push. These headphones are very bright, but they're not flat. But that's okay. My ears have acclimatized to them, or my brain is acclimatized to the way things sound. So I can absolutely work using these headphones. Any other headphones, I can just listen. I can't work. I don't feel like I know what to do next. Then thinking about it, when you mix on speakers, you've got to set them up somewhere. So you now have to take the room into account.
Yep.
You have no choice.
Yep.
You're at the mercy of the acoustic environment the speakers are in.
Mm-hmm.
You can, if the room is dead enough, just listen loud and get close to the speakers and sort of not hear the room. But you have to be in a really dead room that can take the level for that to happen. Otherwise, you're at the mercy of the room. When you put on a pair of headphones, you are wearing the studio on your head. Mm-hmm. Which is 100% reproducible. I've never been in a room that has affected the way my headphones sounded. You could be in an environment that could affect it. Like if you're trying to work on a plane,
yes,
the noise levels are ridiculous. Mm-hmm. That's not going to work. There are going to be things you cannot hear. They're being masked. Yeah. But if you're in a relatively quiet room, you put on the headphones, you're in exactly the same acoustic space. I do not use any correction software on them. And I absolutely don't use any of the spatialization software. I'm not trying to make my headphones sound like speakers. Mm-hmm. Some people swear by having a headphone amp that has some cross-feeding in it, put a little bit of the left on the right to get rid of the sort of uncomfortable things about hard panning in headphones. I default to having some stereo widening on my mix bus, so I am cross-feeding through that anyway. I don't feel that that's an issue. And so many people listen to mixes on headphones that I feel like you're almost doing the song a disservice by having something that is physically uncomfortable to listen to on headphones. Everybody with earbuds or AirPods or Bluetooth things or whatever is listening in that exact same way. And if you've made the mix uncomfortable to listen to, that's made it uncomfortable for them. When I'm mixing records that are 12 songs or whatever, I will invariably spend one chunk of one day listening to the entire record on the speakers. The rest of the record is done in headphones. I find it easier to focus, to hear details, whereas with the speakers, I get distracted by things. It's a weird thing, and this has come sort of over the course of many years that it's migrated into this. It used to be that I had headphones at home, but I couldn't have my speakers set up at home because we were living in half of a house we were sharing with somebody. So my speakers were set up somewhere else. I had to travel and go listen to them. And they weren't in the most ideal environment. It worked, it was fine. That is when I started doing the bulk of the work in the headphones and then checking on speakers. There was a song, I got a call from an artist I'd mixed a record for. He'd written a song. They were performing it live while they were on tour. They were going to track it during one of the shows. And he wanted to put it out 4 days later because he was going to be performing on a late night show in LA. And he wanted to debut the song in that way on that show and have it available the next day. I was in a hotel. When I switch to the speakers, usually what happens is I hear things like, wow, the whole mix just sounds a little bit wet. Like there's too much reverb, too much room going on, too much ambience. Or there'll be just some sort of overall subtle thing. But it's not, oh my God, I can't hear the low end, can't wait to get on my speakers and check that out. That's not it. It's really more of a change in perspective than it is something I can't hear on the headphones. So there are probably, I don't know, 20 things in the last 5 years that have been mixed solely on headphones because I couldn't get to my speakers. Once we're in the revision process, unless someone says like, man, this thing just sounds murky, I don't need to go to the speakers. So sometimes I do because it's fun, because they're awesome and they're great sounding speakers. But it's also really easy to just walk in there, not even turn the power amp on, put the headphones on, spend 5 minutes, do changes, send it off. Like, why would I do that on speakers?
An argument could be made it's actually more rational to mix on headphones because your target audience, which is everybody.
Let me address that just separately, because that assumes that I am mixing for people listening on headphones. And the not making people physically uncomfortable on headphones, I think that is relevant. That is a mixing for headphones. But I am never trying to do that. I'm always trying to do the best mix I can possibly do. Headphones, speakers, whatever. Now, I'm not an audiophile mixer. I don't consider myself an audiophile mixer. If you turn this mix up on really good speakers, it better just be fucking awesome.
Yeah.
It can't be, well, you know, you should listen to it on headphones.
What we're talking about here is translation. And so working on headphones affecting the quality of the translation of your mixes or not. Basically, what happens is I travel. I have to recall or do things on headphones. And so the way I do it is I have my Focal Spirit Pros, which they no longer make. And then I have a little Bose speaker. And the reason why I bring the Bose speaker is because I found that when I listen on headphones and I listen to it on speakers after, I have to mix the vocals.
There's definitely a different perception of the vocal level between the two things. Sometimes when I go listen on the speakers, I'll think like, oh, vocal seems loud. What'll happen is it'll seem wet or it'll seem dry.
Exactly.
It's not that it seems one or the other, but like the last sort of part of the process, if I'm mixing a record, I mix all of the songs at the same time. I don't mix a song, send it, now concentrate on the second song. I mix 12 songs at the same time, and I work on all of them, just one right after another, and then I reverse the order, and then I go random, like whatever it is. So I have these very short bursts of listening, and I think with that, and also I can't remember what I've done on a mix. So it's all very much like, I'm not like, oh, let me open this up and see if what I did on the vocal yesterday is still good. It's, I don't even know if I've worked on the vocal yet. I just open up the thing and I hit play. And sometimes I haven't worked on the vocal, but the level it just happened to be at and the effects work. And sometimes I've worked on it a lot, and the next time I open it up, I think the vocal sounds like shit. And I start over on the vocal, not knowing that I'm starting over. Like it doesn't, that part of it's irrelevant. I'm abstracting myself from the process and I really am just listening. But I think that part of the way I work by using so much parallel compression that's shared between the vocal and other instruments it's much harder for me to have the wrong vocal level because it pushes the other instruments around. When it's too loud, it really separates. It separates like crazy. Bring it down a tiny bit, now it's enveloped.
I see.
But you can still hear it. Bring it down a tiny bit more, and now it's just sunk below the mix. So if you mix in a more open style, like you certainly do, you have a lot more space for things.
Yes.
And what that means is the level where you can understand the vocal, like that window is from here to here in your mixes. For me, it's really only from there to there anyway.
It's definitely
because as soon as you get above here, it just sounds ridiculous.
crazy loud. My new process is I have my speakers, my SM9s. I love them. The room is fantastic. Everything's great. I have an Apollo on the desktop, and I have my headphones plugged into Apollo. I listen on headphones to check the bottom. Instead of spending, it cuts my time down. It's kind of like a shortcut. I know the bottom of those headphones is flawless. I place the bottom of the track on those when it's time to do that. Whether it's at the beginning or at the end, in the middle, whatever. I just do that. Once I have the core of the song and the music makes sense, and I start to get into details like, is the bottom hitting right? And I'll put the headphones on for like 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and I'll just get all that webbed out. And then I remove the headphones and I see how it looks on the speakers, and it's usually great, except for reverb levels. I often find that it's too wet when I get back on the speakers, and I have to bring the reverb down. My process recently, which is fun, that I show up here and you're mixing on headphones, my process recently is like, instead of mixing 100% on speakers and check on headphones the morning after, the headphones have become a part of my mixing process because of the traveling. And I checked on my little speaker, my little Bose speaker, for that vocal problem. Have been some of the better received mixes recently, like least amount of revisions and the most amount of like widespread acceptance by everyone. I was like, huh. So I integrated that in my process, especially for stuff that hits hard at the bottom, like urban pop stuff with lots of 808s. It's really hard to have a room where you can mix an 808 really quickly and be 100% sure. But on headphones,
it's going to feel right. You feel the low end easily on any decent pair of headphones.
On speakers, because of the mix in the middle and the masks and whatever the room is doing, there's always going to be a song that's going to be in a key where you don't hear the root as well. There's nothing you can do about that. For those kinds of records, there's always a problem in one key somewhere on the record. The only way around that is to put headphones on. And so it's increased.
I think the reverb thing is kind of the same. I do sometimes think like, wow, this is a bit wet when I go on the speakers. But part of that is because it's the first time I'm hearing it in an acoustic environment that has reverb. The room's got reverb. So I invariably will think it's a little wet, but really what it is, I do think it's perspective, because it'll turn out to not be reverbs. It'll turn out that like there's too much compression within the drum kit, making the drums just decay too long. So it's either the distortion I add or some of the parallel compression. I would hear that on laptop speakers as easily as on my good speakers.
Right.
I think that it's just a gigantic change in perspective that makes you hear that, because otherwise you're listening for balance and you're too into details, whereas that is something that is such a zoomed out view, because if you assess the reverb on the vocal, it's like, oh, it sounds great. Man, that guitar is living in this amazing swirly thing, and the snare goes on forever. And that's the thing. You've got to come back out and just hear the mix, and you realize, like, well, all that shit adds up to a swimming pool.
There's two basses and a bass drum and an 808, and you're working, and you listen, and you're like, ah. You put the headphones on for 30 seconds, you're like, oh. And then you remove the headphones and you listen to the speakers like, wow, yeah. It's kind of like a magnifier for shit.
Yeah.
And that's great. For that, in that respect, it's wonderful.
Well, and here's the other thing, and I actually give this piece of advice whenever I do seminars with students and things like that. Here's how you make sure that you're not screwing yourself by mixing on headphones if, let's say, every time you go to the speakers, the vocal's too loud and everything is way too wet. You don't fix it while you're listening to the speakers. You've got to go back to where you made the mistake, make sure you can hear it, and fix it there. Because then what you're doing is you're training yourself to listen for it. If you put the headphones back on, you're like, no way, man, vocal sounds like the perfect level, and this mix is actually kind of dry, you're now fucked. You don't know which is right. listen in 12 places and hopefully 9 of those will sound the same. And then you know, okay,
Yeah.
all 9 of those are places I can mix and the other 3 are no good. But you've got to make sure you cannot have anything with any listening environment you use to mix. It's like, well, I can't hear that on this, but that's okay. It's never okay. You have to be able to hear everything.
Absolutely.
It's a brain thing to train yourself to listen for it because it might not be as horrible in one place as another. But if you can't hear it, you can't use that anymore.
And also, headphones have resonances, so they are key dependent. That was a big part of listening to when designing these Spirit Pros with Focal. At one point, I was like, "Oh no, let's listen to something else." I have reference songs that I know the spectrum
and I'm
of,
sure
like,
it sounded nuts.
and I was like, "Oh, I'm about to really screw these people over and
Yeah.
give them bad advice." So I went back and revised my whole thing, and now I listened on many, many different things. Now, here's something that I can hear people think. People have been mixing on speakers for making records with speakers for many, many years. Why hasn't anybody mixing on headphones only? And why does it have such a bad rap? And should I not even bother buying speakers and all that stuff?
People mixed on speakers because they were mixing in studios.
Yep. And also because there were other people in the room. You can't really make a record in a team.
You don't hand out 6 pair of headphones.
You don't do that. So there's a colloquial, like a practical thing going on.
But you're sitting in a room built for listening.
Yes. And with all due respect, most of them kind of suck.
Yeah, look, whether or not a control room is any good, I mean, I see stuff where it's like, oh, yes, and this studio has EQ curves for the mains that are different for different mixers.
Oh, no.
So anyway, blah, blah, blah. So yes, you're at the mercy of the acoustic environment those speakers are set up in, but up until very recently, 90% of the time, those are speakers sitting on a console at a known point with a known listening position. You're not in your bedroom putting your mattress up in the corner to try to get rid of the standing wave. I think that question is just not worth asking. Why no one used headphones is probably much more about what you're talking about. Like, you would be crazy. But that's not actually the case, because I remember working with people and they'd plug headphones into the cassette deck that was in the rack behind them, turn the speakers off, and work for 20 minutes. Like, I can't get the background vocals right like this. And part of it would be because the faders were all the way down there and the speakers are over there, so they're not between the speakers. Give me the headphones. But part of it would be that's just another way to check. I mean,
Perspective.
Okay, so if mixing on speakers is so fucking good, why does everybody have to have at least 2 pairs and maybe 3?
And why
Like,
is
that's
there,
the professional setup.
and where is their speaker correction system?
People think I'm crazy because I only have 1 pair of speakers and I never listen to reference mixes. But that's because that's the way my brain works, not because it's the way speakers work. So whatever works for you as a process is exactly how you should mix. If you need 3 pairs of speakers or headphones and 2 pairs of speakers or 6 different pairs of headphones, whatever, great. All you're trying to do at the end of the day is have a mix that will sound good but feel the same no matter where you listen to it, so it doesn't matter what you use to make that happen.
What he said.
Et voilà.